What we want to do now is use all of the skills that we've learned over the last couple of movies and apply them so we can build that dope trope homepage that we were looking at in the previous chapter. Now, in the previous chapter, we built the HTML structure for this page. What we want to do now, over the next couple of movies, is use CSS so our content within that structure can look like this. So what we want to do is come back into Dreamweaver. And inside of Dreamweaver, you want to make sure that you're working with the dope trope site that you set up. Inside that site, of course, we have index.html, and this page has nothing more than the HTML structure in place. So we have a div element acting as a wrapper, then we have a header, nav, a section container, 2 articles, and a footer. So we want to start off by styling the wrapper, and we can go ahead and get rid of the placeholder text, as the wrapper is going to do nothing more than allow us to essentially get these other structural elements in the location of where we want them within the page. So the first thing that we have to do, of course, is write some CSS. So go ahead and double-click the Files panel to collapse it. Inside the CSS Designer, for sources, go ahead and click the plus sign. We're going to add a new CSS file. So choose the first option, which is create a new CSS file. Go ahead and click the Browse button. Browse to the Dope Trope local site folder. Go ahead and call this site-styles.css. You're going to save it in the local site folder. You want to make sure that you have link selected for the Add As option. Then you can go ahead and click OK. Now, you may or may not remember that earlier we applied IDs to each of these elements, and the ID that we applied to this div element is wrapper. So what we want to do is create a new ID selector. So in the selectors section, click the plus sign. If you have the wrapper element selected, it should automatically name that selector for you. If not, go ahead and type it in and press return or enter. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to set a background color. So come over to the background category, and we're going to set this background color to white. After setting the background color, what I'd like you to do is come back to the layout section, and here I'd like you to set a pixel value for the width, and we're going to set it to 900 pixels. After setting that to 900 pixels, I want you to apply a margin to the top, and that value is going to be 25 pixels. We're also going to set a value of auto for left and right. So come over here and choose that option for both left and for right. So I think we're in good shape there. The next thing that we want to deal with, of course, is the header. And if we look at the completed example, the header is nothing more than the logo, which is some text that reads Dope Trope. So coming back to Dreamweaver, what I'd like you to do is create a new ID selector inside of Site Styles. Now again, we've already provided an ID of header to that header element. And again, earlier I talked about how you want to be careful in terms of your naming conventions with your ID selectors. Probably header's not the best name because you could have more than one header within the document. But again, this is a very simple layout, so it's fine. But just keep that in mind when you're working on your own projects. So let's go ahead and create a new selector. Apparently I had wrapper still highlighted within the document. That's not what I want. I want to go ahead and create a selector called header. Go ahead and press enter or return. What we have to do here is establish a width value. We're going to go ahead and set that to 300 pixels. After setting that to 300 pixels, we're going to apply a margin to the bottom of 10 pixels. After doing that, what we want to do is make sure that we're floating this to the left. Once you float that to the left, the nav will automatically get pulled up. Then you should see main underneath that because we're removing it from normal document flow, so we impact other elements on the page when we float an element, of course. A couple other things that we want to do, we want to come over to the type section, and what I'd like to do is add a web font from Edge Web Fonts. Remember, you can do that by coming over to the Modify menu, and under the Modify menu, you can choose Manage Fonts. We want to come over here into the Sans font category, so you can click that to filter it. As you scroll down towards the bottom, you'll eventually see a font called Source Sans Pro. If you're scrolling and it's taking a long time, you can go ahead and type that in the search text field to narrow it down. Once you select it, a blue check mark will appear, and then you can click Done. By adding that, you now have the ability to add that custom web font to this selector. So for the font family, go ahead and choose Source Sans Pro. Now in this case, we're going to start off with something like 700 for the font weight. We can always adjust that after the fact. We also want to set a font size. Our font size in this case is going to be measured in ems, and we're going to set it to 1.8 ems. After doing that, we want to make sure that we set the color to black, and then we want to change this text from the placeholder text to dope trope. So go ahead and type that in. Again, in order for you to see this render out in that web font, you'll have to come over to the live view. When you do that, you should see the typeface appear in that font style, which of course it is. So we're in good shape there. The next thing that we want to do is control the navigation system. So of course, the container nav has an ID of nav. So let's go ahead and write a selector for that. Come over to the site styles.css source. In the selectors section, you can click the plus sign. And what we want to do is just target nav. We don't need to create a descendant style selector here. It can simply be nav. So once you do that, go ahead and press enter to apply that selector name. What we want to do is set the typeface to the same web font, which is going to be Source Sans Pro. In this case, we can leave the font weight to 200. Again, we may want to come in and adjust that, but we do want to set the font size to ems as well. But in this case, it's only going to be 1.1 em. And of course, we want to set the color to black. In this case as well, we want to make sure that we have the text align property set to right. So come over here and click that button. You should see it scoot over here towards the right. And we just want to make sure that we're also floating this to the right. So in the layout section, you can come over and click the right value for the float property. So we're in pretty good shape here. Of course, everything else will kind of tuck up in between these two elements. We'll deal with that in a little bit. What we want to do is get rid of this placeholder text, and we want to replace it with actual navigational content. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to replace it with news, and then I'm going to add a pipe, which is the shift key. So hold down the shift key and then the backslash key, which is located underneath the delete key. After news, we're going to add donate, and after donate, we're going to go ahead and add contact. So that's our navigation system. If we want to verify how this will be rendered out in a web browser, we can come over here and collapse this temporarily, but then we can click the live view. When we click the live view, we're getting our web font to appear for the logo and, of course, for the navigation system. So far, so good. In the next movie, we want to deal with these other containers. Specifically for main, we want to come in and add this main image. And that's what we're going to take a look at in the next movie.